The room smells like incense, and something older than incense. You're kneeling on a reed mat in a farmhouse somewhere outside Kyoto, probably around the year 900. The body of your grandmother lies in the center of the room, and no one has slept. Not because of grief, though there's plenty of that, but because everyone knows that the next few hours are the most dangerous of her entire existence. Not the years she spent in the fields, not the 3 famines she survived, not the childbirth that nearly killed her twice. The next few hours. Someone has placed a small knife near her body. Someone else has opened the window. Your uncle is muttering something under his breath that isn't a prayer. Not exactly. It's more like a negotiation. And the eldest woman in the room keeps watching the door, not for guests, for something she hopes does not arrive. You don't know it yet, but what's about to happen to your grandmother is a journey more complicated, more dangerous, and more negotiable than anything you were taught in school. It involves demons at river crossings, courts deep underground, and a woman who has been keeping score since before your grandmother was born. It involves a second death, a third, and in some cases, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, it involves coming back. The ancient Japanese did not think of death as an ending. They thought of it as a transition into a bureaucracy, and the paperwork was terrifying. So, what actually happens when you die, according to the people who thought about it harder than almost anyone? You probably have a rough image of Japanese beliefs about death. Zen acceptance, peaceful ancestors watching over the family altar. Maybe the idea that the spirit floats up somewhere clean and quiet and waits. That image is wrong, almost completely. The first assumption is that ancient Japanese people believed in a single, unified afterlife, a heaven equivalent, a destination. They didn't. What they had was a collision of at least 3 different belief systems operating simultaneously, often contradicting each other, and sometimes literally overlapping in the same funeral ritual. You could have a Shinto priest and a Buddhist monk both working the same body on the same night, each sending the soul somewhere completely different. No one saw this as a contradiction. They saw it as comprehensive. The second assumption is that death made you peaceful, that once you crossed over, the difficult part was finished. In reality, the ancient Japanese were more afraid of the newly dead than they were of almost anything living. The spirit in the first 49 days was considered unstable, dangerous, potentially violent, especially if the person had died angry, in debt, in childbirth, or without proper ritual. These spirits had a name, Goryo, and Goryo did not float gently above the family altar. They caused earthquakes. They caused plague. In 863, the imperial court held a festival specifically to pacify the spirits of people who had died under politically suspicious circumstances, because those spirits had, allegedly, triggered an epidemic that was killing people in Kyoto. The festival worked, or at least the epidemic eventually stopped. The court took full credit. The third assumption is that ancestors were universally benevolent, that once enough time passed, your dead relatives became protectors. Sometimes, the ancestor cult in Japan was real and important, and it did involve offerings and gratitude. But it also involved very careful management. You didn't just remember your dead, you monitored them. An ancestor who wasn't regularly placated with food, incense, and attention could slide back into something closer to Goryo than guardian. The line between honored ancestor and angry ghost was a line you maintained with work every single year. The real answer is stranger and older than peaceful. It starts underground, and it starts with a judge who has seen everything. To understand what the ancient Japanese believed happened after death, You have to understand that they were working with two completely different operating systems running at the same time, and they never chose between them. The older system is Shinto. In early Shinto belief, death is fundamentally impure. Kagare. A corpse is not sacred, it is polluting. The land of the dead in ancient Shinto is called Yomi no Kuni, literally, the underworld, or the land of darkness. It appears in the oldest Japanese texts, the Kojiki, written in 712, but recording stories far older. When the creator god Izanagi went to Yomi to retrieve his dead wife Izanami, he found her body rotting, crawling with maggots and thunder gods. She was furious that he had seen her in this state. He fled. She sent demons after him. He sealed the entrance to Yomi with a boulder, and she screamed through it that she would kill 1,000 of his people every day. He replied that he would create 1,500, and that, according to the Kojiki, is why people die, and why there are always more births than deaths. An argument between two gods at the mouth of a cave. Yomi was not a good place. It was not a place of judgment or reward or punishment. It was just underground, dark, and permanent, almost. Then Buddhism arrived in Japan, officially around 552 CE, and it brought an entirely different infrastructure for death. The Buddhist afterlife had courts, it had judges, it had a graduated system of consequences based on the specific things you had done while alive. And it had the possibility, this was the crucial part, of intervention, of rescue, of changing the outcome with the right prayers, the right rituals, the right monks reciting the right texts over the right number of days. The two systems didn't replace each other. Japan absorbed both. What emerged was something uniquely layered, a death belief that borrowed Shinto's terror of the impure corpse and Buddhism's detailed moral accounting, and added to both a set of distinctly Japanese innovations that neither tradition had started with. Before we go further, if any of this is stranger than you expected, drop a comment below. Which part of the ancient Japanese afterlife would you least want to go through? The river crossing, the courts, or the 49 days? I read every single one. The first hours, danger, and the open window. In the immediate aftermath of death, the priority was not grief, it was containment. The soul, called tamashi, was considered to be in a volatile, confused state. It might not know it was dead yet. It might try to re-enter the body. It might attach itself to the wrong person in the room. The window was open to give it somewhere to leave. A knife or sharp object was placed near the body, in some regions, on top of it, to ward off malevolent spirits who might try to inhabit the corpse before the soul had fully departed. This practice had a name, hirogata. The body was placed with the head pointing north, the direction associated with death and the underworld, a positioning so specific that sleeping with your head pointing north was considered bad luck for the living because it mimicked a corpse. In the Buddhist framework, the soul did not immediately travel anywhere. It entered a transitional state called chuin, the in-between, and it remained there for 49 days. 7 weeks. During those 7 weeks, the soul was judged not once but 7 times, once per week, by 7 different courts in the underworld. Each court examined a different category of action from the dead person's life. Each had its own judge. The family's job during those 49 days was to hire monks, hold ceremonies, and generate enough accumulated good merit, kuyo, to influence the verdict at each court before it was delivered. This is why the 49-day funeral period existed. It wasn't just mourning, it was active legal representation for the dead. The river and the old woman who sees everything between the world of the living and the world of judgment sits the Sanzu no Kawa, the river of 3 crossings, and at the river waits Datsueba. Datsueba is not a demon, She is worse. She is an old woman. Her name means something like the hag who strips the robes. When the dead arrive at the river, she takes their clothes. She hangs them on a tree, and the branches bend under the weight of each garment according to the sins accumulated in a lifetime. The heavier the droop, the heavier the moral accounting to come. How you cross the river depends on how you lived. The virtuous cross on a bridge. Those with moderate sins wade through shallow water. Those with heavy sins enter the deep current, where demons wait in the water to pull them down. Children who died before their parents, considered a cosmic inversion because children are supposed to outlive their parents, were not permitted to cross at all. They were made to stack stones on the riverbank for eternity, building towers that demons kicked down over and over. Buddhist tradition eventually introduced Jizo, the bodhisattva who protects children, as a counterweight, hiding child souls in his robes. Thousands of small stone Jizo statues at roadsides across Japan still carry this function. People place red bibs and toys at their feet. Some of them are hundreds of years old. The courts of King Enma. The presiding judge of the underworld is Enma-o. King Enma, derived from the Hindu deity Yama, but thoroughly Japanized. He sits at the center of the court system with two tools: a mirror that plays back every moment of your life, and a ledger that records every deed. There is nowhere to hide, and no point in lying. The mirror already knows. Enma assigns each soul one of 6 possible destinies. The 6 realms of Buddhist cosmology: the realm of the gods, the realm of humans, the realm of fighting spirits, the realm of animals, the realm of hungry ghosts, and hell, or rather the hells, because there were several, each calibrated to specific categories of wrongdoing. A person who had been greedy without cruelty might become a gaki, a hungry ghost, wandering with a huge stomach and a throat too small to eat. A person who had committed significant violence might enter one of the hells, where the duration of punishment was measured not in years, but in cosmic units of time so large the numbers become meaningless before you finish saying them. But here is the part that made the Japanese system distinctive. None of these destinations were necessarily permanent. With sufficient prayer, with the right ceremonies performed by the living, a soul in one of the lower realms could be pulled upward. The living had agency over the dead. The dead were not gone. They were in a system that could still be worked. The 49th day, and the decision that lasts. At the end of the 7th court, the final verdict was issued. This was the day the soul was assigned its next form. The ceremony on the 49th day, called Shijuku Nichi, was the most important ritual in the entire death sequence. It was the closing argument. After this, the soul moved on, into its next birth, or into its assigned realm, or, if it had accumulated enough merit over many lifetimes, towards something beyond the cycle entirely. Some souls didn't make it to the courts. Some stayed. The yurei, the ghosts who appear in Japanese folklore, white-robed, hanging hair, no feet, are specifically souls that could not complete the crossing. Usually because of unresolved attachment, a love that was severed, a wrong that was never answered, a death so sudden and so unexpected that the soul didn't understand what had happened. These are not metaphors. In ancient Japan, they were as real as weather, and they required specialists to resolve them. Here is what's strange about looking at this from the outside. We tend to assume that elaborate afterlife systems are about comfort, that people invented heavens and hells and courts and rivers because the alternative, nothing, was too frightening to sit with. And maybe that's partly true, but the ancient Japanese system wasn't built around comfort. It was built around accountability, and not just for the dead, for the living. The 49-day mourning period wasn't passive. It was work. The kuyo ceremonies, the monks, the offerings, The careful monitoring of the soul's progress through 7 courts. All of it meant that death was not a rupture between the living and the dead. It was a continuation of the relationship. The living still had obligations, the dead still needed things. The boundary was permeable, and the permeability came with responsibilities on both sides. That is a fundamentally different relationship with mortality than the one most modern people carry. We tend to treat death as a hard stop. The person is gone, the relationship is over. What remains is memory. In ancient Japan, the relationship continued under different conditions. Your grandmother needed you to perform the ceremony. Your obligations to her did not end when her breathing did. And the system had a strange mercy built into it. The idea that the verdict wasn't final, that a soul in a lower realm could still be reached, that the prayers of the living could change outcomes in the underworld, meant that guilt was not just a feeling to be processed. It was a signal to act. You could still do something. The dead were not out of reach. Whether that's comforting or terrifying probably depends on how you treated the people in your life while they were still in it. The ancient Japanese, it turns out, had a very practical answer for that uncertainty. Start the ceremony early and don't miss any of the 7 weeks. There's something that keeps nagging at this. The system we've been talking about. The courts, the river, King Enma's mirror. This was the official version. The Buddhist architecture that the imperial court adopted and the monks codified. But underneath it, before it, and running parallel to it the entire time, there was Yomi, the dark place, the place with no courts, no mercy, no second chances, just underground and permanent, and the sound of Izanami screaming through a sealed boulder. Which raises a question that Japan never fully resolved. What happened to the people who died before Buddhism arrived? What happened to the souls from the centuries before the courts existed? Before King Enma had his mirror, before the monks knew the right words? Because Japan has a name for those souls, too. And what the ancient records say they became, and what the people around them were expected to do when they showed up, is one of the stranger corners of Japanese history I've found. That's the next one.